Okay, so get ready for a deep dive that starts in a pretty, well, unexpected place.
Oh, this is going to be good.
We're talking about Puerto Rico's waste management crisis, a serious problem.
Absolutely.
But the thing that kind of kicked off our look into this, well, it was a comedian's joke and not a very good one.
Yeah, jokes and garbage, not usually a winning combo.
At a Trump rally,
Yeah.
actually. Sometimes, the most serious issues get brought to light in the most roundabout ways. It's like, boom, spotlight, but from a weird angle.
Right, and that's what we're going to unpack today.
Exactly. We've got news articles, EPA reports, even a scientific journal article, all looking at this issue of overflowing landfills in Puerto Rico, a system that's really struggling. Our goal is to, get past the politics and the headlines and really figure out what's going on.
What's causing it, why should we care, and what can be done?
Yeah, what can be done? So, back to that Trump rally.
Here we go.
The comedian, Tony Hinchcliffe, goes up on stage and calls Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Not cool, right?
Definitely not. And the reaction was swift, and understandably so. People were angry.
And rightfully so.
You had Puerto Rican residents, figures like Bad Bunny, Ricky Martin, they all spoke out. They saw it as disrespectful, like he was dismissing the island and its struggles.
Yeah. And it's interesting, though, because in a way,
It backfired, in a way.
yeah, the joke was awful, but it sort of forced this issue into the open. It became something people had to talk about.
Right. It's like he accidentally ripped off a bandage that was covering a much deeper wound, and suddenly everyone's forced to look at it.
Powerful image. So let's look at what that wound actually is. The facts on the ground. We found that Puerto Rico generates a lot of trash, over 5.5 pounds per person every day.
Which is, a lot higher than the mainland U.S. average of 4.4 pounds.
Significantly higher.
Yeah. And where does all that trash go? To landfills? Most of them are overflowing way past capacity.
Breaking EPA regulations left and right.
And the island's geography makes it even trickier. Limited landmass, no easy way to ship the waste off somewhere else.
It's a recipe for, well,
Disaster.
disaster. And it's not just about numbers, though. We came across stories from people living near these overflowing landfills. Imagine the smell, the flies, the mosquitoes, just constant.
Some residents talked about having to wash their dishes before and after using them because of the dust and dirt blowing in from the landfill.
Wow.
Yeah, everyday life becomes a struggle.
And it gets even worse. There are real health concerns. One resident we read about, she talked about losing multiple family members to cancer.
And that fear, that it was linked to the pollution from the landfill, that's heavy stuff.
Absolutely. Another resident described breathing in this gas coming from the landfill at night. Like it was fog, that's how thick it was.
This is going way beyond inconvenience at this point. This is a threat to people's health and well-being.
This is where it gets real. This is the human cost of this crisis. So how did Puerto Rico end up in this situation?
Right.
It can't be just one thing.
No, it's definitely a web of issues, a whole bunch of factors coming together. And, one of the big ones is the economic crisis that has been gripping the island for over a decade.
Makes sense. When resources are scarce, things like waste management, they often end up on the back burner.
Exactly. Less money for those essential services. And then you add on the fact that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. It's in this weird in-between space.
How so?
They have to follow U.S. federal regulations, but they don't get the same kind of autonomy or resources as a state would.
It's tricky.
So it's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly. Not enough money to handle the problem, and a really complicated regulatory system that makes addressing it even harder. And then on top of that, you've got tourism.
A huge part of their economy, right?
Absolutely vital. But it also generates a ton of waste, especially plastics. Just adds another layer to the pile, literally.
And I'm guessing the lack of a robust recycling program doesn't help matters either, right? Absolutely. While there is some recycling happening in Puerto Rico, it's just not widespread or efficient enough to make a real dent in the amount of waste going to those landfills.
Not enough infrastructure, not enough public awareness.
It all adds up.
It paints a pretty bleak picture, honestly. It feels like a perfect storm of factors working against them. But there has to be some hope, right?
Right. I mean, there has to be some light at the end of this tunnel.
There has to be. What are some potential solutions to this crisis? What can be done?
Well, the good news, I guess, is that there's growing recognition of this problem, both within Puerto Rico and even at the federal level in the U.S., and that's the first step, right? Acknowledging that there is a problem.
It is. And hopefully that recognition leads to action. Are there specific actions being taken to address the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, you remember that Toa Alta landfill, the one that we were talking about earlier?
The one that's causing so many problems for those residents.
Exactly. Well, the EPA has actually issued an order for it to be closed.
Wow, that's huge.
And they're putting plans in place to make sure that the contaminated liquids from the landfill are managed properly. It's a big win for the community and shows that at least someone is taking this seriously.
It's a great example of concrete action being taken. What about other examples? What else is happening?
Well, Puerto Rico's own Department of Natural and Environmental Resources, they've announced these plans to strengthen their regulations, invest in recycling infrastructure, because without that, as we said, recycling efforts can't really succeed.
Right, it's got to start with the basics.
And they're also working to raise public awareness about the importance of recycling.
It sounds like they're really trying to tackle this from multiple angles.
Yeah, a multifaceted approach is key, given all that we've talked about, all those factors at play.
It's not a simple fix, that's for sure. And it's not all top-down either.
Right. We're seeing a lot of these really amazing grassroots efforts. Residents and environmental groups are organizing, pushing for change, raising awareness in their communities.
Taking matters into their own hands.
Exactly. Their voices are gaining traction and making a difference.
It's inspiring to see people taking action.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty remarkable to think that it all started, at least in part, because of this, this tasteless joke.
It's wild, isn't it? It's like he unwittingly struck a nerve and brought this critical issue to the forefront. And even though it came from a really unfortunate source, some positive action is coming out of it.
It's a reminder that sometimes awareness can spark in the most unexpected ways. But it's what we do with that awareness that really counts.
That's the key, and that's exactly what we're going to explore further in part 2 of this deep dive. We'll dig deeper into the implications of this crisis, the potential solutions, and what it all means for you, our listener. As we kind of dig a little deeper into what's happening in Puerto Rico, it's clear this is way bigger than just one island's trash problem.
Right. It feels like we're touching on something that's a global issue.
Totally. It's about our whole relationship with consumption, the stuff we buy, and what happens to all that waste.
It's that whole throwaway culture, right? We buy something, use it for a bit, and then toss it without even thinking about where it ends up. But here in Puerto Rico, those consequences, they're impossible to ignore.
Exactly. And the thing is, those consequences, they go way beyond just those overflowing landfills.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the environmental impact. Decomposing waste releases these harmful greenhouse gases, which, contribute to climate change. Then there's polluted soil, polluted water. Whole ecosystems are affected.
It's like we're trying to just, bury the problem.
Yeah.
Literally bury it in the landfill.
Yeah.
But it comes back to haunt us.
It always comes back. And the problem is only getting bigger. Global population is growing, consumption is increasing, time is running out.
Yeah, it feels like we're on a collision course.
Yeah.
Puerto Rico is like this, like a warning sign flashing red.
A wake-up call, yeah.
Yeah.
We need solutions, and we need them fast.
Solutions. That's the big question, right? What can we actually do?
Right.
What do solutions even look like?
That's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately, there's no easy answer, no magic bullet. It's going to require change on multiple levels. Individuals have to change their habits. Governments need to implement better policies. Industries need to shift their practices. It's massive.
Okay, so let's break it down, make it manageable. For us, for individuals, what are some concrete steps we can take? It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the size of the problem.
Yeah. I think the first step is awareness. Just start paying attention to what you buy, how you get rid of things.
Like a mental checklist before I buy something.
Right. Ask yourself, do I really need this? Can I maybe borrow it from someone, buy it used? Can I fix it instead of throwing it away?
Makes you think twice before you click add to cart. So awareness is key for us individuals. What about governments? What can they do to, promote better waste management?
I mean, a big one is investing in recycling infrastructure. Make it easy for people to recycle. Curbside pickup, drop-off centers that are actually convenient, clear, and consistent education campaigns so people know what to do and how to do it right.
What about incentives or even penalties? Like you don't recycle, you pay more. Would that work?
Totally. Some places have these pay-as-you-throw programs where you're charged based on how much trash you put out. Less trash, less you pay, encourages people to recycle more.
Makes sense. So individuals, governments, .anges. What about big companies? They create a lot of the products that end up as waste.
That's right. Industries play a huge role. They need to start designing products with sustainability in mind from the very beginning, using recyclable materials, minimizing packaging, creating things that will last, not just break after a few uses.
Moving away from disposable, single-use stuff.
Exactly. We need a more circular economy, where things get reused and repurposed.
Like that whole reduce, reuse, recycle thing from when we were kids, but for real this time.
Yeah, exactly. And it can't just be about the products themselves. Businesses need to look at their entire operations, manufacturing, distribution, everything. Every step of the way, there are opportunities to reduce waste.
So we've talked about the situation in Puerto Rico, the global context, some potential solutions.
Yeah.
But what are the roadblocks? What's stopping us from actually making these changes?
Yeah, that's the key question. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of challenges. Money, politics, public perception.
Right, like these solutions sound great, but they cost money, right?
Absolutely. Building new recycling facilities, updating old ones, education campaigns, none of that comes cheap.
Especially for a place like Puerto Rico, already dealing with that economic crisis.
Exactly. And that's where political will comes in. Leaders have to be on board, they have to make this a priority, and they have to be willing to allocate the necessary resources.
Because it's easier to just, kick the can down the road and hope someone else deals with it later.
Sadly, that happens all too often. Short-term economic concerns trump long-term environmental concerns. But then there's also the challenge of just, getting people on board, changing behaviors. It's tough.
Like we've all been doing things a certain way for so long. Breaking those habits, it takes a lot of effort.
And sometimes people are just apathetic or they feel like their individual actions don't matter. We need to overcome that.
Yeah, get people to understand the urgency. And that's where education comes in, right? Give people the knowledge, the tools to make a difference.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
But we also have to talk about something else that we came across in our research.
Mm.
The social justice aspect of waste management.
Right. It's a crucial part of the conversation.
Because it's not just about trash, it's about people.
Exactly. We have to acknowledge that the burden of waste disposal often falls disproportionately on marginalized communities.
Meaning, they're more likely to live near landfills, incinerators, all those places that pose health risks.
Right. They bear the brunt of the pollution, the health problems.
That's not right.
It's not. So any talk about sustainable waste management, it has to include this element of equity. Everyone deserves a clean, healthy environment, no matter where they live or their socioeconomic status.
So it's about addressing those underlying inequalities.
It is. Making sure that everyone has a voice in these decisions and that the benefits of any solutions are shared fairly. It can't just be, oh, we fixed the trash problem, but only for some people.
It's got to be for everyone.
Right.
So we've got the challenges, the costs, the politics, public perception, social justice. It's a lot. But are there any success stories out there? Any examples that give us hope?
Oh, absolutely. There are a bunch of really inspiring examples from around the world that show change is possible. I mean, a classic example is Sweden.
Sweden, what are they doing right?
They've been a leader in sustainable waste management for a long time. They have this incredible system where they combine waste reduction, recycling, and even waste-to-energy technologies.
Waste to energy, that sounds pretty high tech.
It is. They basically burn the waste to generate electricity. There are some concerns about emissions, but they have really strict regulations to minimize those. So they're basically turning trash into a resource.
That's wild. How well is it working?
It's super effective. They recycle or compost almost all their household waste. Less than 1% ends up in landfills.
Less than 1%.
It's amazing. It shows that it's possible with the right commitment and innovation.
That's seriously impressive. What other examples are out there? Give me some more good news.
Okay, well, closer to home, we have San Francisco. They've made some huge strides in reducing waste. They have this mandatory composting and recycling program, and they've set these ambitious zero waste goals.
Zero waste. Is that even, possible? It sounds almost too good to be true.
It's a really tough goal, but they're actually making progress. They've banned single-use plastic bags, styrofoam containers, and they're working with businesses to reduce waste at the source.
So it's not just about what happens after the trash is created, but preventing it in the first place.
Exactly. It's a much more holistic approach, and it's showing real results.
These examples are, really encouraging. They show that we can create more sustainable systems. It's possible.
They give us hope. It can be done. So, we've gone on this journey. We've seen the reality in Puerto Rico, the global context, the potential solutions, the challenges. What does it all mean for our listener?
What do we want them to take away from this conversation?
I think the most important takeaway is that even though this problem is massive and complex, we're not powerless. Every single person can make choices that contribute to a more sustainable future. Reduce how much you buy, reuse things whenever you can, recycle properly, support businesses that are making an effort, push for better policies. All of that matters.
It's about understanding that our individual actions, even if they seem small, they all add up. We can be part of the solution.
Exactly. It's about being conscious, making choices that align with our values.
It's just so striking to me how we started this conversation with that comedian's awful joke at a rally. And it's brought us to this much bigger conversation about the environment, social justice, the state of the world.
Right. It shows how awareness can come from unexpected places. And what matters is what we do with that awareness.
We can be outraged or we can be inspired to act.
Hmm.
And in the face of challenges like this one, action is what we need.
I couldn't agree more. So as we move to the final part of this deep dive, let's explore how to turn that awareness into meaningful action.
It's pretty amazing how this deep dive into Puerto Rico's waste management crisis has, opened up this whole discussion about all these interconnected issues.
Yeah, it's a prime example of how complex problems, they rarely exist in a vacuum. Waste management, it's not just about trash. It's tied to how much we consume, resource allocation, environmental justice, the whole shebang.
It's like we're pulling on one thread, and it unravels this entire tapestry of interconnected things. And one of those threads that keeps kind of popping up is Puerto Rico's political status,
Yeah.
as a U.S. territory.
Definitely. We touched on it a bit earlier, but it's worth digging a little deeper because it really adds another layer to the whole situation.
It creates a unique situation, right?
Mhm.
I mean, they have to follow U.S. federal regulations, but they don't have the same autonomy or resources as a state. How does that impact their ability to deal with this crisis, this waste management crisis?
Well, for one, it can create challenges in terms of funding, getting access to the money needed to implement solutions. And then there's the issue of regulatory enforcement. Are those federal regulations actually being enforced consistently? And it even impacts things like disaster response.
That makes sense. I mean, thinking about Hurricane Maria and the devastation it caused, it must have been incredibly difficult to deal with all that debris on top of their existing waste management problems.
Oh, absolutely. The hurricane just completely overwhelmed an already strained system. And then navigating federal aid, disaster recovery funding, all of that becomes even more complicated because of Puerto Rico's unique status.
It sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare, honestly. But even with those systemic challenges, there's still hope, right? There are ways to find solutions.
There is. And this is where I think the power of community-based solutions really shines. We often look to governments or big organizations to solve these problems, but sometimes the most innovative, effective solutions, they come from the ground up.
I love that. The people closest to the problem are often the ones who come up with the best solutions. Tell me more about these community-based solutions. What have you seen in Puerto Rico?
Well, there have been some amazing examples of communities coming together to organize cleanup efforts, setting up composting programs, even starting their own small-scale recycling initiatives. They're not waiting for someone else to fix it. They're taking ownership, creating change at a local level.
That's so empowering. They're not waiting for permission or handouts. They're taking action.
Exactly. And what's great about these community-based efforts is that they're often much more adaptable. They can adjust to the specific needs and resources of their area. They understand the local context and can tailor solutions accordingly.
And that can create a ripple effect, right? Inspire other
Yeah.
communities to do the same. It fosters a sense of collective responsibility.
Absolutely. It becomes more than just cleaning up trash. It's about changing mindsets, creating a culture of sustainability, educating future generations to care for their environment.
It's incredible how this conversation has evolved. We started with the comedian's insensitive joke, and now we're talking about community empowerment, sustainable practices, a vision for a better future. It's really come full circle.
It's a testament to the power of awareness and how sometimes engaging in these tough conversations, even when they come from unexpected places, can lead to real change.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable world. The challenges are huge, but our capacity for positive change, it's huge too.
It really is. We all have the power to make choices that support a healthier planet, reduce our consumption, reuse things, recycle, support businesses that are doing the right thing, advocate for better policies. It all adds up.
It's about realizing that we're all connected. Our choices have an impact. What we do matters.
And at the end of the day, that's what this whole deep dive has been about. Recognizing that interconnectedness, understanding the challenges, and exploring the possibilities for a brighter future. Not just for Puerto Rico, but for all of us.
Well said. And on that note, we wrap up another deep dive. We hope you learned something new, maybe challenge some of your assumptions, and hopefully feel inspired to take action in your own life. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.